download them, optimize them, and upload them again. That seems silly.
People tend to install like 100 plugins and then they're like, why my site is slow?
Within, I think, the first week, had over 500 downloads.
Did you move everything to your server and now you're just using API, or are there some bundled tools?
We'll let you use our API for free in lossless mode only. So
how are you guys different, and why would somebody pick you over something like Cloudflare?
Because we have a $25 plan that's unlimited sites.
By the way, I'm a paying customer, just so you know. Hi guys, it's time for another episode of our podcast. Today I have the pleasure talking to Shane Bishop. By the way, Shane has the best last name ever because it always reminds me of Mass Effect. I don't know if you know the Bishop, the main character in the game, just like really good vibes. And so Shane is founder of EU. I don't know how to pronounce that correctly.
Sure.
We will talk about, naming of the company a bit later. So first of all, thank you very much, Shane, thank you very much for joining the podcast, and thank you for making the time, so early in the morning.
Yeah, great to be with you. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. So first of all, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and, your journey? How did you become founder? Why did you start your company? And what do you do? By the way, I'm a paying customer, just so you know.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because I was looking back through my emails trying to refresh my memory on what all we were going to talk about. And I was like, wait a second, this is an email from way back with his name on there. Like, wow, been using you for a long time. So yeah, it all started a little over 11 years ago. I had started trying to build some websites for family, for our church, and I'd been using WordPress for already 6-7 years at that point, just for personal websites, just for fun. And I had set up a website for my in-laws' greenhouse and wanted to showcase their plants and flowers, of course. And so they've got a lot of pictures. I was doing some speed testing, had been working on that at my day job as well. I worked at a small community college here. I thought, well, doing really good with this site, but the images need optimized. It's like, man, I really don't want to have to download them, optimize them, and upload them again. That seems silly. I was like, well, there's got to be a plugin for that, right? Got to be. Well, kind of. The ones that were there, one I couldn't run on my shared hosting. It was the CW image optimizer back in the day.
Is it?
And then Smush was still using the Yahoo API at that point, which was chronically unreliable. They would just have outages randomly, and you could only do like really small images. It's like, so what's the point of using it if you can't use it on your big images that need it the worst? I looked at, I can't fix the Yahoo API, obviously. So I thought, well, what about this other plugin? It uses these free utilities to compress images right on the server. That seems like a good idea, and not having to rely on some third-party service. All your stuff is done right by your own server. But I'm on shared hosting. I was using Bluehost at the time. Thought, well, what are the odds that I can actually like compile and set up some of these open source utilities that I'm more familiar with on this server? And sure enough, they had all the build utilities and everything that you could compile stuff right within your home directory. And so I forked CW Image Optimizer, called it the U Image Optimizer, because my business at the time was exactly WWW, so it's an abbreviation and also a little bit of a joke, like, your images are gross and bloated. Yeah, I forked it and rewrote it so that it would use those utilities instead directly in my home folder, instead of having to install them as the root user, if you know what that is. I don't have root on a shared server, obviously. So that was kind of how it all started. And I thought, well, I wonder if anyone else could use this. So I submitted it to the WordPress repository and got it approved. And within, I think, the first week, had over 500 downloads. I thought, oh, I'm onto something here. So it just kind of took off from there. And morphed over the years into now we have our own API for some of the premium options that we obviously can't bundle with plugin. We're using some proprietary tech in there. So
yeah, I started like developing websites when I was in high school, and at that time I was running FreeBSD and PHP and some MySQL. I really didn't get into WordPress development until I actually started working for myself. And it seems like in WordPress there is a plugin for everything, like anything you want under the sun nowadays. It wasn't the case maybe like 10 years ago, but that's the situation. But one of the biggest pet peeves that I have when it comes to WordPress is that people tend to install like 100 plugins, and then they're like, why my site is slow, why it's always getting attacked, why it's bloated and loads so slowly. So obviously having plugins is wonderful, having plugin ecosystem is wonderful. But can you tell me a little bit maybe more about how can you create a good plugin for WordPress? Because as you probably know, in the plugin repository, probably maybe 30-40% of plugins is something that somebody developed over a weekend or maybe a month, and then they kind of like, hey, there is, I'm not motivated to keep up with the development. I just like kind of forget about it, and then they become this dormant, orphan plugins that really don't get any updates and so forth. So as I understand, you still have the plugin, but as you mentioned, for some premium functionality, you are calling back your own server and you do compression on your server, and then you serve it probably locally or maybe from your CDN as well. I don't know how it works. Maybe you could talk a little bit how it works, because as you mentioned before, you just bundled some tools with your plugin, or you built it in the home directory so you don't have to have root. But now I'm sure it's a lot more sophisticated.
Originally, the idea was, you had to either compile it yourself, these tools yourself. The plugin would allow you to say, hey, here's where I put them. And then it would go and use them, assuming you did it all right. And that was, I quickly discovered that was asking a lot of the average WordPress user. So I thought, well, there's all these other people, obviously, that could use the plugin if I could bundle utilities. So that's where kind of the next step in the evolution was, that started bundling Optiping, JPEG, Tran, and Gifsicle with the plugin and using it still directly on the server. A couple of years later, there was still, like if someone's got exec disabled, that's the function that PHP uses to run command line utilities. Well, a lot of web hosts are like, no, you can't do that. We don't want you accessing command line stuff on the server. So they disable that. And it's really difficult to secure that kind of stuff. You've got to be really careful about escaping the command, escaping the arguments. There's a whole lot of considerations there. And so a lot of web hosts are just like, no, we don't trust anyone to take care of all that stuff well enough that it's worth leaving that wide open. And so there's all these people still that, even though we bundled the utilities with the plugin, couldn't use it. And so back in the early days, I think probably close to when you started using it, it was just, let's take these utilities, put them on a server that I own or lease from. Originally, I had one from HP. They did virtual servers way back then. And then shortly thereafter, man, I don't even remember who I started using after that. That was a long time ago. Might have been DigitalOcean, but I don't think I was using them quite that early.
Where are you hosting your stuff now?
Now everything's DigitalOcean, but I can't remember if I had started with some of their stuff way back. That was like 2013. So it seems like I might have, and then I kind of shifted the compute stuff over to some hosts that had more high-end processors before DigitalOcean had their CPU
maybe
optimized
Linode or something.
servers.
Maybe Linode or something.
A RAM node was one that had really good. They had like 3.4 gigahertz servers that were just kicking butt. Vulture at the time had pretty high performance servers. There was one, they got bought out. Speedy KVM was kind of, they weren't real big, but they had servers in Texas and a couple other locations. And they all had, they were almost kind of like older gen processors, some of them, or I guess they were less cores, I think was the issue. And a lot of the big providers were like, no, we want lots of cores. We don't care about the gigahertz. But for our use case, that's what we need. So performance has always been a big thing. Back to your question about, how do you write a plugin that's not a pile of steaming poo? You got to be concerned about performance. And for me, I suppose that's probably been, the impetus from the very beginning. But that's an important thing. When someone's got 50 plugins, they don't want it slowing down their site. I've got 45 on our main site, and it runs fine. You can have 50, 60 plugins without it slowing down your site too much, especially on the front end, because most, like our plugin should never hardly run on the front. Well, unless, of course, you're using the CDN, then it does some front end processing. But, all the optimization stuff happens on the back end.
Yeah, you were saying that the next iteration was that you bundled everything, put it on your own server, basically, and then probably created like an API or something that the plugin uses.
So, yeah, we created an API, and it was similar, I think, to the style of Smush, although I can't remember exactly how their API worked, but where your site uploads the image to our server does the work and sends it back. And then fast forward a couple of years, 2015, we were still doing all lossless. But we had some people saying, hey, there's tools like TinyPing and JPEG Mini and some of these cool new lossy options that really do a pretty good job of managing the quality and compression trade-off without making your images look terrible. And so that I started looking into some of those and thought, well, hey, we've got a few thousand, maybe not a few thousand, probably a few hundred at least users at that point, maybe 1,000. And we could kind of pool the cost of that, because for one person, it was like $100 a month to use JPEG Mini. Like, yeah, okay. If you've got a really big site, maybe. But I mean, if you're running a small blog, there's no way you can afford that.
Of course.
And TinyPing was decently expensive. They at least did per image pricing, but it still was on the higher end. And so, well, if I spin up a JPEG Mini server and then kind of proxy the stuff through our system, we could make that work. And so we did. And so that was the first option that we had running there. And then we added PingQuant, which is one of the tools that TinyPing uses. It's an open source tool developed by a guy, Cornel Lazinski, I think. He works for Cloudflare now. So that was kind of the evolution of the API. It's still pretty similar. We do offer TinyPing and TinyJPEG compression through Tinyfy now as well. We got a sweet deal with them where we've been able to lower the costs, kind of in the same vein where we're doing over 1 million images a month, and so we can get lower pricing for everyone that way.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But is it the last evolution of your product, or what happened? Did you move everything to your server and now you're just using API, or are there some bundled tools still that come with the plugin?
Yeah, so there's still the bundled tools. So almost everyone that's using free mode is using the bundled tools. We did open it up a couple of years ago, so that if you're on what we call an exec deprived server, we'll let you use our API for free in lossless mode only. So it's basically doing the same thing as what the bundled tools will do, but you don't get any of the premium goodies. But you can still get something, at least as much as what the free plugin would do. And that includes WebP compression, which is lossy. So that's, you can get a lot of savings that way.
Awesome.
And then we added in 2017 a CDN service called EasyIO CDN. And so that, instead of compressing all the images that live on your server, it copies your images to our servers as they're requested by the user, does its magic on them, and then delivers it to the user. And then, of course, it caches that so it doesn't have to compress it every single time. Then the last kind of iteration is where we went beyond image optimization with our Swiss performance plugin. I had used WP Rocket and Auto Optimize and a few other plugins, but it was kind of a mishmash, and there was extra stuff that I wasn't using. And I thought, what if we could put all this into one plugin? And so that's what Swiss Performance is. It's everything that I use outside of image optimization, some of the tools that I had already created as well, because I was like, well, none of these are doing exactly what I want, and so I'll build it. And so I had a few of them already built and thought, well, I'll take those and then add the others that I don't have built yet. And yeah, we released that, I think, in 2019.
Is it a separate product, or is it part of the...
It's a separate plugin, but if you get our standard unlimited bundle, it includes everything. It includes the original Compress API, where you can compress your local images and save storage. It includes the EasyIO CDN, which makes it super dead simple for stuff like WebP conversion and AVIF. And then it also includes Swiss.
Wow, that's cool. So you did mention something that I wanted to talk about is Cloudflare, right? Because I think, I don't know if they're your competitor, but I think they're trying to create this kind of like one-stop shop for everything pretty much under the sun. Every day it feels like they're releasing a new product. They're like, oh, we have this firewall. Oh, we have this, we have this DDoS attack mitigation. Oh, we have this, pages. Now you have Cloudflare pages you can push with Git to Cloudflare and whatnot. So it seems like they're really, really good at releasing new products. I don't know how good is their product offering, but I've been using Cloudflare for quite some time, and to be honest, I like it quite a lot. It's very easy to set up, since you are just changing DNS, and after that you can make all the changes in Cloudflare itself. And they do image optimization. So my question is, and they support WordPress. I think they have a plugin as well, but I think it's mainly for just resetting cache and, all that good stuff. I don't think they do any processing on your machine. I think it's still done, by Cloudflare, even if you use a plugin for WordPress. But how are you guys different, and why would somebody pick you over something like Cloudflare that does quite a lot already, for free out of the box?
And like you, I've been using Cloudflare for a very long time. I actually set up one of the first 500 sites on Cloudflare. Have the t-shirt to prove it.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
They sent out a limited edition 500 t-shirts to the first 500 sites. So it was kind of cool. But back then it was all for the security stuff, because it proxies your site, protects you from bots and all that. And I had been using Project Honeypot to kind of spam trap bots that were visiting my sites even before then. And then they said, hey, we're launching this Cloudflare thing. Try it out. Okay. So I've been using Cloudflare ever since on at least some sites. Ever since that, I can't remember how long that's been. 2011, maybe? No, maybe. Yeah. So, and then they do image optimization, and theirs is similar to EasyIO, to the CDN side of what we do. And so originally it was like, well, we're doing two different things. We're compressing the images on your server, making sure you're not using too much storage space. And they're, expediting delivery, making sure it's as close as possible to your visitors. Great, grand. We're kind of working together that way. Now it is a little bit more of a competitive deal, but I guess one of the main things that's different is the auto scaling that we have that's built into our lazy loader that kind of integrates more tightly with WordPress, because they do some kind of automatic, based on device speed or connection speed, device size. They do some of that. It's a little pricey. I think their lowest plan is still $20 a month per site. And so that also is one of the differentiators, that you're not just paying for image optimization. Then you've got to pay for, the advanced security. You got to pay for the whole Cloudflare package you want their image optimization. And if you're doing that and using their image optimization and you love it, great. You don't need our stuff. That's awesome because they're providing a pretty good service. But for someone who's not using Cloudflare Pro, our solution is a lot more affordable.
How much is
it? I was just going to say, especially because we have a $25 plan that's unlimited sites. So that's a lot difference in price. Our lowest plan for a single site is $7. But,
oh, wow. That's really affordable. And I think you have a free version as well, right? As you mentioned.
Yeah. So yeah, there's the free version of the plugin that, like I said, it does lossless plus WebP. So you can save a little bit on your images, but also get the big wins with WebP. And then lazy load is included for free, and you can scale down your images, and the auto scaling engine is included in the free version, although it's not quite as good, but it'll do like any of your images that are already responsive. It'll make sure that just in case if you're using the stock WordPress responsive stuff, sometimes it's not quite perfect depending on how well your theme developer set things up. Which sometimes not that good. And so it goes in there and says, yeah, this is exactly the size we need. And so it picks the exact right one from the sources list. But otherwise, if you've got non-responsive images, that's where EasyIO comes in, because then it can say, hey, we need this size. It doesn't exist. Give it to us. And EasyIO will go do that.
Yeah, it reminds me of, what is it, ImageX or something? I think there is another like big player, right?
Yeah, I think that's
ImageX or something. Yeah,
ImageX, yeah. ImageX, Optimoli started a year or two after we got going, and they're doing a similar thing with, I believe they do auto scaling, but it's that same sort of image optimization via CDN. And ShorePixel launched their version of that a couple of years ago, I think. There's a few different options, and it's very similar. What it is actually built on originally was Jetpack's Photon image accelerator. So that's kind of where it came from, and then added some of the front end stuff with the lazy loader that makes it even more accurate with the scaling, because there's been a lot of issues with Photon over the years, and quite honestly, it just doesn't get the attention that it needs to improve those things. So, and sometimes it just, with all the different ways you can do things in themes and CSS and everything, it's really tough to get that right. So we keep pushing the edge and keep advancing that.
That sounds great. So, you started this company quite a while ago. So where are you now in terms of, staff and size? Of course, your front page already says that you have 1 million plus WordPress installs, which I think is quite an achievement. So, kudos to you guys for making it like really big when it comes to WordPress ecosystem. And you have optimized over 7 billion images. So, in terms of numbers, it's pretty impressive. But what about your company? Are you still kind of like lean and mean?
Yeah, we're still pretty lean and mean. I think it's maybe 3 years ago, I hired Adam to help with customer support, and he loves doing support. That's his jam.
Wow!
And so it's really, that's taken a load off of me. So I'm helping him periodically with some of the more advanced cases still, but he's taken on a lot of the day-to-day support issues, and that frees me up for server management and development and marketing, which I'm not very good at marketing, but I try.
No, I like your website. I think when it comes to just like marketing for WordPress plugins, I mean, if you're big enough, then at some point you will just rank really well when people search for like image optimization. There is like internal SEO for the WordPress plugin world, I'm sure. Some stuff that you do.
And that's probably been something where we've had a little bit of a leg up since we started so early on back in 2012. Even when Smush got taken over by WP MooDev, we already had, I think, 100,000 sites using our plugin, and theirs was in decay. They of course brought it back and made it significantly better, way more reliable. But yeah, by that time we already had gained a significant user base and just kept on growing. And
so it's you
there's a ton of them out there now. So it's kind of crazy to see how many people are using, all these different solutions. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess in a way, but it leads to, for example, our clients asking us like, hey, what is the best XYZ plugin for WordPress? And I'm like, well, there is no best plugin for it. There is like 3, 4, 10 options, and it depends on your needs and your, how sensitive you are to like paid plugins and all of that good stuff. But did I understand correctly that it's you and Adam currently, just two of you?
Just the two of us. Yep.
Wow.
Just the two of us.
That's pretty awesome.
That's the reaction we get a lot.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that obviously support is really, really hard to automate, and especially if you want to really serve your customers, you have to provide really good support. So it kind of makes sense that your first hire, so to speak, is customer support. But like, if you're thinking beyond, the numbers that you have been able to achieve, I mean, you must at some point hire some additional engineers. And like, what are your aims? Like, you have achieved now some very good success, but I'm sure you're not stopping here. Like, what is the big picture? What is the dream, so to speak?
Yeah, so probably the next might be, a developer. I'm starting to work with Adam a little bit because he's interested in some of that. So even though he really loves the support side, he'd like to help out with development. So he'll be starting to take on a little bit of that. But yeah, there's a definite possibility that we'll be needing development help. I've got a to-do list a mile long at this point, so it certainly wouldn't hurt. But it's getting the revenue to a point where it makes sense to bring on another, at least half-time, maybe full-time person, and having enough work to keep them busy for perpetuity. Because I don't want to be like, well, we'll hire you for 6 months and then we get caught up and, well, sorry, I don't got anything else for you to do, which probably is not likely. It wouldn't take 6 months. It'd be a while.
Yeah, a couple of years for sure.
Right. So yeah, and maybe, somewhere in the marketing thing, although I don't know, some of that stuff is, I like having my own spin on things, my own silly, dry sense of humor, sprinkled throughout our help stuff and our blog posts and whatnot. So it's a little hard to give up some of that, but I got to have the time to do it, or I got to have someone else do it. So those are probably the next areas that I'll be looking into. But I'm in no rush. We get, you see some of the other companies and they're doing all these big fancy things, and you go, man, maybe we should be doing that. And it's like, well, we've got 1 million users. We must be doing something right. So
yeah,
we focus on support, and we make sure that's not neglected, make sure we're keeping up on that, and meeting our users' needs. So even though I have a to-do list a mile long, sometimes there's things that come up, in support, and we've seen it a couple times, and then it's like, yeah, maybe we could do something with that real quick. And so we spend half a day or something getting it done and make it happen.
So in terms of like 1 million WordPress installs, of course, I think maybe not most of it, but like a substantial chunk is people just using your like free version of the plugin, right? It's not the premium offering that you have. So like, what's the ratio there? Like, is it 100,000 paid customers, or is it very secret?
It's very small.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's maybe 1% of that. We've got about 40,000 user accounts, I think, at this point, but I would say probably only 5,000 to 10,000 of those user accounts are actually active users. There's a little bit easier way to see, so it's hard to say. I used to look at that and go, oh man, that makes it seem like we've only got like 5,000 sites using our stuff. But now that we have Easy.io and we have a little more visibility there, and see that it's actually probably more, and maybe it is closer to 100,000 because it's just people using it on multiple sites. But we have 25 to 30,000 sites using the CDN right now. That's just the CDN. People using the API, it could very well be 100,000. I haven't ever really run numbers or tried to track how many different sites are using the API. We could. That would be maybe an interesting thing to figure out, because when you're sending images remotely, it automatically includes your URL in the user agent. So it's possible that we could, figure that out somehow.
Yeah.
Not something I've done yet.
So basically you have huge user base, and I think maybe you don't push hard enough to convert those customers into paying customers. Like you have very, very substantial amount of installs, but the amount of paying customers is not so big. So I guess you're not very aggressive when it comes to, getting people to buy your premium offer.
I try to keep it a little more organic. We've, I think, still never run a paid ad, except for $50 I spent on Facebook ads once. That didn't do anything.
Of course.
Well, why not? I'll give it a try. It's just $50, and yeah, it was over pretty quick. And was like, well, okay, that was fun. But yeah, we tried to do it a lot more organically. We do have an affiliate program, and so that's been helpful for us. And we did a push with AppSumo a couple of years ago to do a lifetime option that really got us some different users, got us a lot more agency users, and also allowed us to get some additional revenue and spend some money actually on our website and stuff, because it had gotten a little long in the tooth. It was a theme from around 2015, and I had tweaked things here and there, but it was definitely not the prettiest. That's some of the bigger things, but yeah, a lot of it's just been word of mouth, people posting reviews.
Yeah, I just think that there is opportunity maybe to expand to other CMS systems now to capture more users.
Yeah, and there probably would be. We've had requests for Shopify, and we've probably had requests for a few others. Well, I know we've had requests for a few others, but I'm trying to think if we've had requests for ones where it actually makes sense. We've had people ask, can I use this on Wix? Does it make sense? No, it doesn't. Wix does their own thing with image optimization. I think Squarespace, I believe, is the same way. So a few of those that are more proprietary, they do their own, performance stuff on the site. And so there's not really anything we can or should do with those. But Shopify is one that definitely interested in. But again, it's one of those things that I can't spread myself too thin. So I've got to have time to keep it up, to maintain it, and do a good job with it. And so that's something where we're going to need another developer probably to be able to take on Shopify and do some of the expansion stuff like that.
I'm just thinking that I was thinking maybe more, in terms of something like Drupal, maybe, because Drupal is very popular as well. It's open source. It's very close to WordPress in a sense, because you run it on your own server. You don't buy it as a service like Shopify. It's not a SaaS offering. Drupal has a very good plugin ecosystem and so forth.
Yep. Yeah, that would certainly be an option. I don't know if Joomla would be popular enough. I almost feel like we've seen some requests for that though. But yeah, I've used actually all three of those in the past.
Joomla?
Who knows? I don't know. It's been almost 20 years since I've used it. We used it for an intranet site way back at the first college I worked at. So it's been a long time. Back then it was, what was it called? It was something else, not Joomla. I don't remember.
Yeah, I remember. They changed their name, actually. You are absolutely correct.
Mambo, I think.
Mambo sites
Mambo.
or something. Yeah.
And yeah, so Drupal definitely, I feel like that's more developer centric. At least it was when I was using it. But I could definitely see, one of the things I think that sets our plugin apart from a lot of the others is the flexibility, the customizability. We've got hooks for everything. We've got overrides and constants for everything. And then besides that, we've already got so many options within the plugin that you can use to customize things to any given site. So that's, I think, something that would probably cater to the Drupal audience pretty well.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. It's less user-friendly, if I'm completely honest. At least that's how I feel. It's not as easy to use, but it's way more customizable, and it just feels it's a little bit more stable, and it's very opinionated when it comes to development. I think it kind of has its own way to do things, and if you're okay with that, it seems like a very good solution. So yeah, I think that could be interesting. But as a person who, has the Cloudflare 500 t-shirt, by the way, big props, and as a person who probably has seen every possible variation of a good or a bad WordPress website, what do you think people who are building WordPress websites, and they don't have to be technical people, I mean, just people who are buying WordPress websites or, getting some subcontractor to do the website for them, like, what do you need to keep in mind? Like, what is a good WordPress website that is pleasure to use, that is easy to maintain, loads fast, of course, your plugin installed, but, like, what is the, like, in your opinion, like the best practices when it comes to WordPress? Because I've seen some horrendous WordPress websites where nothing works, it's very slow, and just is not a good experience. So what is your take on that?
Well, I think one of the things is being careful. You mentioned, people with 100 plugins, and so being careful of what plugins you actually put on your site, because even one, all it takes is one to really slow things down. I had one way back. I'd been using Jetpack on a site and used the widget visibility back when widgets were still a big thing. And maybe for some people they still are. I probably use them on some sites where it's just they're still there and I haven't done anything with them, but it was widget visibility, which was kind of slick for choosing where different widgets would show up on which pages, and it was really slick. I thought, man, I don't use anything else in Jetpack, so I could just get rid of that and go get a widget visibility plugin. So I found one and I was using it. After a while, I thought, man, things are just getting slower and slower when I try to save a post or do stuff on here. Just weird. Well, I found out that widget visibility plugin was querying the entire list of users, doing that every time I would save a page, because it had the option that you could show it on different user or author pages, maybe. It's something weird like that. I can't remember exactly, but that was the idea. And it's like, oh, that's way too much time. It was taking like 20, 30 seconds.
Wow.
Just for that query. And when we had 10,000 user accounts on our site, that's a little slow. Initially, I just hacked around and disabled that query. I'm not using that. I don't even know exactly what you would use it for. Why would you show different widgets to different people? Yeah, eventually then I went and got a different plugin that didn't even do that. And so now I don't use that plugin at all.
So plugins, being really aware of your plugins.
Yeah, and
But how do you know which ones are good? How do you know which ones are good?
I actually just wrote an article on that a couple days ago.
Oh, okay.
So check out our blog, EWWW.io. Look for the blog. The most recent article is about plugins called "You Must Have Plugins."
Yes, I actually checked it out. Yeah.
But so some of the things that I recommend you look at is, of course, look at how many installs it has. That's not the end all be all, because you might find a plugin that's got 5,000 active sites that works really, really well. It might be new, or maybe it's just a niche thing that, there's only 5,000 people that can actually use this thing. And then look at the reviews, and look at how recently it's been updated. One of the things that is, I think, really a good indicator is if an author is updating the tested values. So in other words, are they checking their plugin with the latest version of WordPress? Because plugin authors don't have to release a brand new version to update that value. They can just update that value, and then that tells you, hey, they've done the testing, and then that reflects also in the last updated time on the plugin. And so that's a good way to, if you see one that hasn't been updated in 3 years, stay away from that. A lot of times that won't even show up anymore in the repository unless you search for it by name. But that's definitely a good indicator. So last updated, tested up to reviews, and not just, because if a plugin's got some bad reviews, see how the developer handled it. Because sometimes, honestly, bad reviews, they're just people being jerks. And we don't get a lot of value out of that most of the time, because someone that's just mad. It takes someone that's pretty upset to leave a bad review. And they're usually not in their right frame of mind, unfortunately. It'd be nice if they would cool down a day and then leave a constructive review, right? But that's not usually how it works.
People don't operate like that, Shane. No. They just don't.
No. So, because we get definitely constructive feedback from our users, but it's usually not in the 1-star review section.
I usually also go to see the recent reviews. I think it kind of reflects better the situation, maybe, with the plugin.
Yeah, so not just to look at, what's their rating, but actually look at, like you said, the recent reviews. Go and read what, and see, I was looking at a plugin that I've been using for anti-spam for ages and ages, and they had 200 some reviews. I was like, well, yeah, they're still doing okay, I guess. And then I looked at the reviews, and when the company that took over expanded it, and you'll probably, if you've seen that plugin, you know what I'm talking about. A lot of people were mad. They're like, hey, we don't want this garbage. Well, you can still use it for anti-spam. I still do. But a lot of people were upset about that. And since then, there's been like 4 reviews in like 2 years, which is kind of weird. There's people just not that happy with it enough to leave a review. I don't understand why you would only have that few of reviews in the last 2 years when they had 200 before that. That's something, that kind of a trend would be a little worrisome to me. So I say I still am using that plugin, but may not be for long. After I looked through that, I was like, okay.
So plugins, definitely. What about hosting? Should you go out and buy the cheapest hosting you can get?
Oh, goodness. No, so don't. And to be fair, if you're doing just a hobby project, sure, get cheap hosting. Who cares? You're just having fun. But if this is a site that you want to make money with, and it matters to you, you want to support your family or whatever it may be, don't skimp on the hosting. You don't necessarily have to go with the top of the line hosting, but don't go with something that's going to be $2 or even $5 a month. It's just
how
not
much
worth
should you spend? Like what's the adequate amount?
It's hard to say. Honestly, probably $15-$20 minimum a month.
Is it?
Below that, you're getting into pretty sketchy shared hosting. I know. Yeah, like Bluehost is probably still below that, and I haven't used their service for years and years because it would get overloaded. And fortunately, they're usually, or at least back 8 years ago, last time I used them, they were good about moving you to a new server if it got too crowded and you complained about it. But they may not be anymore, and they're also owned by one of the biggest conglomerates, and I don't trust them. So that's not who I would recommend. Of course, we use WP Engine. That's who I recommend. It might be a little expensive for some people, especially just starting out. So there's no harm in going with something a little cheaper. If it's the right fit, Cloudways is a decent option.
Is it?
Because they're cheaper and you get your own server. It's a small server. It's a cheap server, but you're not usually competing with resources because if you're using DigitalOcean droplets, there's different options, but that's a decent option. I don't have a lot of good options under that threshold. There's
What about
ones I've
Kinsta?
used.
Have you heard about it? Kinsta?
Kinsta is
Yeah.
pretty good. Kinsta and Flywheel are both pretty good. I think it's been a while since I looked at the prices. I was trying to remember like which ones are below that. I know Kinsta, yeah, it does have cheaper options than WP Engine, and I've still, I think, even got a test site on their system, and their support is great. They were a little bit of a thorn in my side for a couple of years, but I think we're back to being friends now.
Why?
Okay,
What
so
happened?
one of the evolutions of the plugin was that hosts like WP Engine, Kinsta, Flywheel would not allow our plugin, period. Even though they had already blocked the exec function, so you couldn't run it without using our API. You couldn't use local server resources to image optimize. They're like, no, you still just can't use the plugin. What? Why?
That's weird.
So, well, okay. What if we created a plugin that was a clone of the main plugin that just used the cloud service, the API service, and didn't even have the option, didn't have the binaries or nothing, so it's safer. And I think that was one of the main things, that they wanted security as well in the other aspects.
Okay.
And they didn't want the binaries even sitting on the server for someone to misuse. That's what we did. So we created this separate plugin for, I don't remember how many years. And then WP Engine did something dumb. I can't even remember what it was. But they screwed something up with our plugin and their must-use plugin, and it wreaked havoc. And I thought, I'm going to use this as leverage. So I said, hey guys, how about getting us off the banned list? And so we went through that process, and we made a lot of improvements on the security side with, code formatting, code quality, to get it up to their standards, and make sure that, we batten down the hatches. There's no possibility of security leaks, and really locks it down good. And they're like, okay, let's go. So that was when we finally started to see that shift where we could start using our plugin on all the others. Well, so I thought, well, contact Kinsta and see what they think, because WP Engine is one of the biggest players, and they unbanned us. And Kinsta's like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. It makes sense because you're not allowing the exec function. Because even in our plugin, if exec is disabled, or even if it's on one of those hosts, we're like, no, you can't use it. You got to use the API. It took 2 years for that process to complete.
Wow.
So that was they had it done in a few months, and then there was some holdup with updating their must-use plugin that just like, really? We're waiting this long? And if you asked for it, they would update it. So that's what we had to keep telling people. They're like, hey, Kinsta says your plugin is banned. Yeah, just go tell them to unban it on your site.
Okay. Well, at least there was a loophole of some sort. So that was good.
Yeah, they were willing to work around it, and they were trying to make sure their support engineers knew about it. But yeah, it was just 2 years. It was, but they finally got that back in shape. To be fair, I think they were working on some pretty big stuff. And so once that finally got done, then that kind of, and I don't know what their development team looks like. I don't know how big that is, but I imagine there was some bottlenecks and not enough people to get that push forward. So
yeah, it's all about priorities for sure. So when it comes to plugins, completely understand. Same, I have we are on the same page. When it comes to hosting, I always say that you should probably pay about like $50 for hosting minimum if your business depends on the website staying up and just being available and so forth, because at that price range you usually get some good stuff, you get some really good backups, you get maybe a staging server as well so that you can do some testing. Support usually becomes a little bit more responsive at that price range, so you can actually get somebody on the phone maybe even, and so forth. So yeah, for sure, don't go with the cheapest hosting, and probably get hosting that is closest to your end users. Of course, there are CDNs and other cool things you can use, but if you just want to run your website, you don't really want to wonder too much about CDN, they don't want to set it up at all, get hosting from the place where, most of your users are.
Yeah, definitely. So, if you're in Europe or Asia somewhere, and you're not in North America where a lot of, web hosts have their locations, yeah, definitely look at a local option. Some of the big ones, of course, have global locations, and so that works out well. But yeah, location is definitely important if you're wanting to make sure that's fast, because I've seen, even, well, it's not that close, but, thinking something, well, just North America to Europe, they have great transit lines and whatever, but it still takes time, and that at least triples the time to first byte, and then everything else is slower. So yeah, definitely something to consider is make sure web host has locations where your visitors are located.
And maybe the last one that is really a big part of this whole puzzle is a theme. So there is so many ways to, get a theme on WordPress. You could go out to Envato or Theme Forest, and you can buy a theme for like, I don't know, what is it, like $40, $50, something like that. You could actually have some WordPress shop create a theme for you, and it could be absolutely from scratch. Or you could do something yourself. You could get a free theme, or maybe even use some stock themes, even though I don't think anybody uses them, but I could be wrong. It feels like they come bundled in with WordPress, but I've never seen one in the wild. I've never seen somebody actually use it, but
I'll surprise you.
Yeah, I'm sure there are people who do that. But the biggest problem that I've seen is that clients usually, when they like buy WordPress, they usually buy WordPress website or they commission somebody to do it for them because they've heard that WordPress is most popular, easy to use, and maybe they have some previous experience with it. But nowadays, there are just so many ways to do things in WordPress. So you could have an Elementor website, right? Like you install Elementor and then everything becomes drag and drop. And it's, it's not a very good solution for a large website, that's for sure. Like, I think that's an understatement.
Yeah.
Then you could also, have something like Genesis theme, and then you could create a child theme based on it. But the end user, like the customer who is, paying the bills, he has no way of verifying that the theme was created properly, it adheres to WordPress standards and so forth. So how can you navigate in this, weird environment where everybody says the same thing, like, hey, your website will be so easy to use. Everything is drag and drop. It's easy. It's super fast. But then when you look at the code underneath, it's just garbage.
That's a tough one. We're using a custom built theme on UIO. And like I said, I'll shock you. I have a site that uses a stock default 20-something theme.
Wow.
Actually, that first one that I built for my in-laws, I don't remember what I built it on originally.
Yeah.
But it's not using the same theme anymore. Now it's actually using, I believe, 2017 is the theme it's using. And they haven't been doing as much with it in recent years, so I've just left it on that. And it looks pretty, so it's fine. But yeah, that is definitely, and you look at the numbers, there's just a lot of sites using the stock default themes, but that's not necessarily, there's quite, yeah, it's shocking when you look at the active installs, how many people are actually using those. It's like, wow. And to be fair, some of the more, recent ones with full site editing and stuff, allow a ton of flexibility. But honestly, for someone getting started, I don't know if full site editing is necessarily the best option. I'm not even using that. So it seems like there's a lot to learn when you go that route, whereas a theme that's, can use blocks, but yet still gives you a framework and kind of a template to work within, I think helps for a beginning user, helps them navigate things a lot easier. Is it going to be performant? I think that's something that honestly you just have to test, because I haven't seen any particular themes that I'm like, oh yeah, these are the most awesome code ever. I honestly don't look at theme code very often. Even performance wise, it's kind of hit and miss. Sometimes you have theme that's really popular, and it's just dog slow. And then sometimes you got ones that are great, and that they work pretty well. Elementor and Divi probably aren't the greatest. They're some of the most popular, but they're not speedy. And even working with Elementor, they've been resistant to some of the changes that could make it work with our services and plugins better, just because it's more work for them. Okay, and they're like, no, we built it this way. We like it better, and we're not going to change it. And it's like, okay, fair enough. So there's been things that we've done to work kind of within that constraint to make things work better, but it still limits our ability a little bit. Yeah, I've got a friend here locally that believe they're using Genesis themes, and they've been big fans of that. And from what I've seen, their sites run decently well. She uses, of course, our plugin on everything.
Of course.
But she didn't used to, but she does now. And we co-host a local meetup here in Glendive, and it's a lot of fun chatting. And so I've seen a few of her sites that use Genesis, and we've looked at different things, and generally they run pretty fast. So that's really kind of the only pre-built ones. Well, I shouldn't say that. On one of my demo sites that I've done, I use Ocean WP, which I think works with Elementor, and it's decently fast. But again, you got to be careful.
Of course.
Because those page builders, sure, they're easy, but they also let you do stupid things too. So just be careful of that. Just because it's pretty doesn't mean it's smart or clever or useful for your users. Sliders.
Yeah, that's for sure. We didn't talk about where you based. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit. And maybe did you incorporate right away when your plugin started to get traction? How did you transition from the, working for somebody to being basically a founder of a cool startup?
Yeah, so I'm in Glendive, Montana, in the United States, and so it's middle of nowhere and pretty small. Not the smallest. There's much smaller towns around here, but smaller town than a lot of people are used to. Yeah, so Adams in St. Louis, so it's all remote.
So how did you make the
no problem. That transition?
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly when it was, but pretty early on. I think I had initially just kind of tracked because I was doing kind of web development stuff for my in-laws and for our church and a couple people in town here. And so I was just keeping track of those transactions, and I thought, I probably should have a separate bank account for that. And so I set that up pretty early on. I don't know that it was necessarily before I started the plugin, but then of course the plugin was free for a year and a half before I started monetizing anything and had any paid service. But for sure by that point, I was like, I got to have a separate bank account, got to get set up with the state, and it wasn't necessarily, not incorporated necessarily. So in the U.S. we can do like an LLC for if you're a solo developer or whatever, and to set up a business entity. And so that's what I've done on that end of things. And so, that was pretty early on. So if I'm going to start bringing in any amount of money, I want to make sure this is set up right and that people can see that, hey, this is a legitimate business. It's been registered properly, and this is legit. So awesome. I think that's important. One of the other things, just kind of a side tangent, but one of the things that I think is helpful and important if you're trying to appeal to a bigger audience, is using your own domain for email.
Of course,
email's great and it's free, or whatever you're using for email. But when you are emailing clients and customers from that, it doesn't look very professional. So try to use your own domain for email. I think that goes a long way in establishing user trust.
For sure. And now just a few questions before we wrap up. You mentioned that you do a little bit of marketing yourself, so the blog and so forth. So like, how did you grow your business? I mean, somebody who works alone, basically, you only hired Adam just like more or less recently. So you've been doing developing, support, marketing, maintained your website, and everything else, administration, and so on. So how did you manage to grow your business? Like, what really worked for you? Did you attend like WordPress events, or did you talk to agencies locally? Like, how did you just grow, or was it just organically people thought like, hey, this is awesome plugin, and pretty much like through the grapevine they've got more users for you?
Yeah, it's been almost all organic. And so I can't really take a lot of the credit for it, because it's just been people spreading the news and letting others know about our plugin. It's hard to say or even pinpoint it on any one thing. I know one of the bigger sites that we've worked with, and some of it's been getting connected with different companies. And again, I can't necessarily take credit for that, because I don't go out looking for people to promote our products necessarily. A lot of them come to me, and it's been, it might sound weird to say, but it's been kind of a God thing that he just has directed things, and I go, whoa, I could never imagine. Like, one example is with TinyPing. I had been struggling a little bit with the JPEG Mini setup, and they contacted me when I was kind of thinking about it. But I was like, man, it's kind of expensive. I don't think we could do that. And they contacted me and were like, hey, we wonder if you would be interested in working together. And I was like, well, okay, I guess so. And it's been a great deal for our users. So it's been pretty cool to see.
Yeah, so pretty much organic, I would assume. And nowadays, probably most of the people, they find you through the plugin, system in WordPress, right? That's how they search for you most likely. Like, maybe there are a few keywords that you rank really highly for, and people find you that way.
Yeah, there's probably some search stuff. And of course, image optimization performance is a part of search engine optimization. It's not the most important part.
Yeah.
So don't get caught up in that whole, in other words, don't do that to the exclusion of doing your job and doing other things, because writing good content and making a useful tool is way more important than a lot of other things. So yeah, content always trumps everything else. Performance is a very small portion of the search engine rankings. It's important, but it's still just a portion. It's not the whole picture.
Yeah, the way that I think about performance is that you don't optimize performance for search engine. You optimize performance for user experience, because the user experience is much better when site is snappy. You can, browse more products. You can see more pages. You are just generally, you feel happier, if I could say that. And user experience, good user experience, influences SEO in most cases. So I think they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties into our marketing efforts, or lack thereof, with the user experience. People have good experience with us because of our support and our focus on support, and that trickles down to more users and more users and more users. Whereas if we just got all the technical bits right and we spent money on advertising, not necessarily going to be awesome if we don't provide good support, if we don't back it up. Yeah, you got to make it good for your users, and that's ultimately what Google and other search engines are looking at. Are you making your site a good experience for your users? They're trying, even though there's ways to game the system, they're trying not to allow that to dominate the search rankings. They're trying to make it focused on, is it a good experience for your users? Because they want to deliver a good experience for their search users as well. And if they send you to a crappy site, then like, Google sucks.
Yeah, exactly.
And they don't, because they're sending you usually to good sites. So
yeah, for sure. And now that there is even more competition, maybe now for the first time in many, many, many years, Google actually has a competitor, being thanks to ChatGPT integration and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that they even more will double down on user experience and making sure that people are actually happy using Google. But I think we've been talking for quite some time, Shane. This has been just wonderful. You're so happy-go-lucky person, smiling, and I can see that you actually enjoy what you do, and you are definitely growing your business, but I don't think you're aggressively growing your business. I think you're letting things happen as they should happen, and you don't really look for that. Obviously, I think you didn't get any funding, right? You didn't raise any funding. You bootstrapped, and everything basically done out of your own pocket, using your own time.
Yeah, and I think that's important, because even I mentioned the AppSumo lifetime deal that we did a couple of years ago, and I think had we done that way early on, well, one, they probably wouldn't have done it because we weren't mature enough in our product offering, but it might have been too much where we couldn't handle that influx of lifetime users. Whereas a product that I've been using for a while just announced they're closing up shop because they had too many lifetime users and they didn't grow organically enough, and now they just can't handle the cost. And so that sort of thing can happen if you try to move too fast and try to move beyond yourself. I think it can be a recipe for disaster. So grow at your own pace. Don't try to rush things. Be realistic with what you can handle and focus on that.
That's good. That's really good. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shane. It's been a pleasure. It's been wonderful having you here, and I learned quite a lot myself. And now, if somebody is looking to create a ChatGPT wrapper and publish it as a WordPress plugin, hoping to get millions, I think they might think twice now. They might think twice. Yeah, for sure. But I really appreciate your time, Shane. It's been wonderful. And let's stay in touch on LinkedIn. And if there is anything I can do to help, let me know. But I'll be definitely checking out. I actually wrote it down, have some notes. I'm really looking forward to testing the Swiss plugin that you mentioned, the all-in-one performance plugin to replace like WP Cache and stuff like that. So looking forward to that.
One of my favorite features, probably might be one of the lesser known performance things, but it's kind of like Asset Cleanup Pro, where you can disable certain JavaScript and CSS assets on any given page. And so I was using a different tool, and it didn't have quite the flexibility I wanted. So that was part of what I rebuilt into Swiss when I built that. So I love that, being able to, because there's certain scripts that you need to have, but that don't need to be on every page. And it's honestly, especially with CSS from a developer standpoint, it's really tough to nail down CSS for a specific page or a specific use, or like a short code or whatever. It's because you usually have to enqueue your CSS in the head, and then you got your content down below. You've already enqueued your CSS. How do you connect the two? So it can be really tough for a developer to get those two lined up. So something like Swiss really helps with that.
Awesome. Looking forward to testing that out. Thank you again, Shane, and it's been a pleasure. And I hope all the best to your company. I think you have a bright future ahead of you, that's for sure. With that attitude of yours, I think there's nothing else but success.
Yeah, thank you. It's been fun. It's been a great 11 years, and looking forward to many more.
Thanks. Thank you. Take care, guys. And remember, everything that Shane mentioned is in the show notes. So just make sure to check out the website, the plugin, the blog post. We will link to that as well. It's you must have plugins essentials. Definitely will link to those. And yeah, thanks so much. Have a good day, guys. Take care.